although it's dry, but.
I know, we need a little rain.
Okay, let's see here. All right, so, have you move just a little bit more to your right?
Okay, I'll get that cane out of the way too. Is that,
Nope, 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 you're fine, you're fine. Let me
Okay.
just, yeah, I will adjust this. Okay. Okay, so, here we go. All right, so Beverly, I want to begin with your family background. Where's your family from? And yeah,
I grew up in the Big Rapids, Paris area of Michigan. My parents were farmers, and but my parents were very involved in the school and the township and everything that went on. So I grew up with a father that was supervisor and a mother that hired the teachers and for the wholesome sum of $500 a year. And also we used to go get kindling for the stove because we had an old potbelly stove in the corner. And so we would go on state land, which was close to us with the horses, and get pine stumps for starting the fire with, because in our school we had a big old potbelly stove that kept us warm. And it was 8 grades and all in one room, so it was very primitive. And we walked to school, and the snowbanks back then were pretty bad. We used to be snowed in for 2 weeks at a time, and then they'd have to send the big equipment out to kind of get us plowed out.
so when were you born?
I was born in January 30th of 1933.
And what was your maiden name?
My maiden name is Hurst, Hurst.
And when you think about your family, were they immigrants to the area, or had they been here for a long time?
My father was not an immigrant, but my grandfather, I don't know how far it goes back on my dad's side. My mother always lived in the area, and her father passed away when she was only 7 years old. So he had TB, and so he was sent to Colorado because the air was supposed to be fresher out there, but he died when my mother was 7 years old. So my mother and my grandmother lived on a farm and farmed it as best they could. And all they had is a horse and buggy to go for groceries, which they had to go into Reed City, which was a little ways away, quite a little ways away to go with a horse and buggy. But anyway, that's where my mother grew up, and my father grew up right in the area. But when I went to Ireland quite a few years later with my daughter and her husband, and we took grandchildren, I came back realizing that I lived in an Irish community, and I didn't realize it, And I was surrounded by large families, and some of them came through from Canada, came down, and they immigrated that way. But they were, 8 kids, 13 in a family, big families. But we all, I don't think anybody was rich back then.
Well, how many were in your family?
In my family, I have one sister and I had one brother.
So you really stood out by
Oh, yeah,
comparison.
right. And my sister is still alive today. She's 92, well, she's 93 now, but she, and then my brother was 5 years younger than I was. So I got to be the hired man, and I worked a lot bringing in the cattle, and we had a horse that was given to us that was an Indian pony that Lord knows what he had been through, but he and I got along really good. And so I would always go out and get the cattle into the barn, you know.
So your family was farming then?
Oh yeah, we farmed, we hayed, we picked beans for $1 a bushel. You know, we did whatever we had to do to survive. I mean, we certainly did not starve to death because we always had a huge garden, and my dad always planted a huge garden, way more than he should have, but you know, my mother canned everything.
Did your father sell whatever he raised on the land?
Well, they sold milk back in the day. There would be some truck that would come and pick up the milk from the cows. That was one way that we made money. But my dad worked out sometimes, but mostly we farmed, you know. And later years he worked at the elevator, and he came back so upset because of the fact that they were putting chemicals in some of the food for the animals, you know, and he was really upset about that because back then the animals lived off the grass, and they didn't get much else, you know, maybe a little grain now and then, but we were pretty hard up. I mean, we had chickens, and my mother would have a chicken that she killed every Sunday, or my dad would kill the chicken and we'd have a Sunday dinner with chicken and biscuits and gravy. My mother was a good cook. She liked to bake. She thought she always had to have at least 3 kinds of pie. And my sister was more of a house person. She didn't like horses. She didn't like helping out with the farm. She would come out once in a great while if she was twisted into it. And I loved it outside, so I rode the horse and got the cattle in, and I drove horses on the hay loader and on the wagon when I was only 10, and they used to pile the hay around me, and I was like, you know, it was picky and not too comfortable. But anyway, I survived, and when we went to high school, when we graduated from 8th grade, then I moved into Big Rapids and worked for my board and room so I could go to high school for the first year. And then the school district decided that they would come out and pick us up, you know, but it was 8 miles out of Big Rapids, so.
So how old were you when you moved in to live on your own and go to high school?
How was it?
How old were you?
How old was I? Probably 14, wow. 13, 14, yeah.
And you were working in Big Rapids so you could pay room and board.
Mm-hmm. Well, I lived with a lady that my sister had babysit for, because she did the same gig because she didn't have a ride to school either, you know. And so she started working for this lady that was a bookkeeper for one of Hudson. They sold Hudson cars back then. So she was a bookkeeper, and she was a single mom. And she had a little boy that was about, I think he was in kindergarten or 1st grade. So I would have to get out of high school, walk to his school, and pick him up, and take him home and babysit him, and then I did a little cooking because that lady was not a good cook, you know. And so she was an outside worker, a bookkeeper, and so um, and I always had to pick up the laundry and do the cleaning, and you know, I mean, I just did whatever, and she was good to us. I mean, she paid us $5 a week for what we did, which was not a great deal, but still it gave us a little spending money, you know. But and my sister and I both, my sister, I don't know, she worked for her first, and then, and sometimes I used to take that little boy out to the farm just so he could see what the farm was like, because he'd always lived in the city. And I think he ended up being a teacher, but I really have lost track of him because the mom ended up getting married again, and then she passed away, and I lost track of Scott. I don't know what, but I think he ended up being a teacher.
What was his name?
Scott Messenger.
Messenger?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that name sounds familiar.
I know, and there was a young man on the internet that said his name was Messenger, and I asked him if he was from Big Rapids, but he never answered me, so I don't know. I lost track. She used to have sisters that lived in Greenville, but I've lost track of the whole family. I don't know. I mean, that she and her husband are both gone, and I don't know what happened to her sister, so I kind of lost track of them.
So you graduated
From high school in
Which one?
1951, Big Rapids High School.
Okay. And then what? What was going on in America at that time, and how did you feel about your graduation?
Well, I was happy to graduate, and we didn't have much source of information coming to us as to what was going on in the nation, you know, at that time, because we didn't have electricity till I was 10 years old. And so
you didn't have a television?
No television. Absolutely. We had a radio that you could maybe get one channel, one station on. And so we didn't get a lot of information, but my dad and mother were very involved in the community, and they used to talk about politics quite a bit, because my mother was a Democrat and my dad was a Republican. So it was an interesting supper conversation. Believe me, I had enough of that. But anyway.
Okay, so you graduated and then you moved back home for a while.
A little while, yes. And I took a job. My first job was at the Pine Shops, which was run by a couple of gentlemen from Grand Rapids. Don Scott and Bob Berglund were their names, and they started the Pine Shops, and it was a pretty good sized factory. I think maybe they only had about 100 employees. It wasn't huge. And these tables were made by the Pine Shops. I happened to get them, and so I've kept them. My sister had, in Big Rapids, it's a big deal. They like to keep the Pine Shops furniture, you know. The factory is now gone, but I did payroll there. That was my first job after high school.
Okay.
And so I stayed there until I met my husband, and we got married in 1953.
So just from my own perspective, I know the Korean War was going on at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear anything about that on the radio?
Well, yes, we did, because my husband's family came from Slovakia, and they had a farm, and they lived probably, oh, it must have been at least 5 miles from where I lived, but they went to a different school. I didn't go to school with him, but I knew his sisters, and he came from a family of 9, and now there's 3 of them left. But he had a brother, Mike, that was drafted, and he never came back. He was 21 years old. And his mother was very upset, which she had a right to be, and it took a long time before they ever got his body back, And all the neighbors, everybody was very upset about it because he never came back. He never even got a leave of absence. He was drafted and never came back. And he was 20 years old.
How did that do you think people were questioning American decisions at that time to be in the war or anything like that?
I think they did, but I don't know. It seemed, I was a kid yet, and I really, I know my parents discussed it, and everybody was really upset about him getting drafted and never able to even come home after that. Yeah. They give him just very little training, and boom, he was in, and he was driving a truck in, I think it was in, I can't remember if it was in France or it was, anyway, he got killed in the truck. They bombed the truck, and he was gone. And so when Tom got to the point where he was about to be drafted, his mother insisted that he join the Navy instead of the infantry where Mike was killed, And so and as you sit here, we just went to the funeral of the friend that joined with him on Monday.
My goodness.
And they were in the service, but they joined together when they went in. But of course, Tom got sent to Philadelphia, and I don't know where Don got sent, but we ended up living in Narragansett, Rhode Island, right next to them when our oldest daughter was born. And they ended up living right next to us. And of course, I had gone to grade school with her, and so I knew her very well. And she came from a family of 13, and they ended up with 8 children, 28 grandchildren, and 54 great-grands. We just went to the funeral on Monday, and you wouldn't believe that church. It was full. It was unbelievable, but we've kept in contact over the years, but his wife just passed away 2 years ago.
Well, let me ask you this. Did you go to college?
No.
You never went. Why was that?
Nobody ever even suggested it because we didn't have the money. Ferris was there, but I never went there because they never suggested it, and I didn't have the money. I was working for $5 for this lady for board and room. That wasn't a lot. And my parents, my cousin and I talk about this all the time because we both grew up in the same area, and we said, maybe we were better off than the kids in the city, because the kids in the city talked about not having enough very good menu and not having a lot of food. At least on the farm, we had chickens, we had eggs, we had vegetables, we had potatoes, we had canned stuff, and we lived I mean, at least we never starved, we had good food.
Do you know why that was? Why were some people so food deprived? What was going on in the country?
Well, I think a lot of those people didn't have a lot of money. I mean, they lived in the city, but we found out when we got in high school, of course, they called us the farm kids. I mean, we had a label on our backs, but we didn't care. But my cousin actually lived in Big Rapids. I mean, she worked for the telephone company when she got out of school. And so she made fairly good, but she said all those kids that she knew and met in school said that there was times when, and her husband, he told her there was times when we didn't have food on the table.
My goodness.
It was pretty poor. And a lot of the men, I don't know, back then, a lot of the guys drank. There was a lot of, but the women all worked their fannies off because of, I mean, they had to work hard to feed the large families. And they, like my friends would tell me, their mothers made 4 and 5 loaves of bread a day. Can you imagine? And then they cooked for those kids, and I don't know how they ever survived, but they were hard-working women, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Because my dad used to butcher for a lot of people in the community. And so whenever we had if we butchered a pig for ourselves, for instance, we would call up, or we didn't call them, we had to go over there because we didn't have a phone. And I never had a phone at home because that was not part of the woodwork. Anyway, they would go and tell Annie, who had 13 kids, come and we will give you some of the, and she put it in the oven and used that lard for pie crusts and for cooking. And we had a big old pear tree, and so we would always call her because we didn't can that many pears. There'd always be more than we could use, so we'd call them and tell them, come and get them. They'd come and get them, and I mean, that's the way they survived, because, I mean, her husband worked, but he also drank. And there was a lot of that went on, and it was very, it was, not all of them did, because my cousin's father was clerk of the township, so he handled all, I mean, for years, and he was, he didn't drink, but the neighbors that had so many kids, oh my goodness, they were.
So was there a local bar or something, or was individuals drinking at home? Or?
No, I mean, one of the gals and she and I have been really good friends for years. Her father worked in steel beams or something. And so he worked, and he probably earned more money than any of the rest of them. But he also found taverns to go to on the way coming home, And so she used to tell about when she was old enough to drive, she'd have to go get her dad, and she'd get so mad at him because he'd make her stop at the bar so he could get a drink, And she had to sit in the car and wait, and she just got really upset with him. But they survived, and Noreen has an antique store, and she's 84 or 85 years old, and she's still running it up at Paris. And she is a worker just like her mother was. I mean, she just always is. She's renting something out, she's buying more property, and she is an entrepreneur, believe me. But
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you met your husband and how that whole relationship changed into a
Well,
marriage.
um, when we grew up, there wasn't any, because we lived in the country, we didn't have an opportunity to join a lot of the, even when the buses started picking us up, we didn't have an opportunity to participate in any of the extra activities at the high school. And so, we were sort of singled out because, unless you had a car and your folks had a lot of money to transport you back and forth, which that didn't happen. But anyway, I don't know who did this, but somebody, and to this day, I don't remember paying to go. We had a schoolhouse it was closer to where my mother grew up, that we had square dances and round dances and schottisch and we had gentlemen in the district and the whole area that would come and play the guitar, and some of them were ladies and some of them, we had some wonderful times. Just square dancing and round dancing. That's the only activity we had,
Was it held in a barn, literally?
It was an old schoolhouse.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you're
And
right.
they remodeled it, and I don't remember ever paying to get in, and I don't remember anybody transferring money. I don't know who owned it or who let us use it, but we had some wonderful memories there, square dancing and round dancing. And
Is that where you met Tom?
it is, well, actually, he rode on the same school bus I did for the last year of that he was in school, because he graduated in 1948 and I graduated in 51. And I didn't look at him then because I thought he was a snob, to be honest.
Why did you think that?
Well, he dated a lot of the older girls, and so I wasn't interested. But one night he came to the dance at the school, and I was there with a bunch of my friends. We had people that we didn't have a car that my dad would let us drive. My sister and I were never allowed to drive the car. And so we would have cousins or somebody that would pick us up and take us to the dance, And there was a lot of older people there. There was moms and dads there that came and danced. So it was a mix of kids and parents. So it was, it was pretty safe, and so that was the only outlet we had, and we loved it.
So Tom saw you across a crowded room, and
Well, he knew who I was because I had been on the bus with him when they kept changing the bus route, and so he knew who I was, and he wanted me to go home with him. And first I said, no, I'm not going home with you. I have somebody else that's giving me a ride. But then he conned some of the other people that knew me to start working on me, to see if I would go home with him. So that's how I started going with him.
well, had you spent the evening dancing with him?
No, we were I don't think he wasn't dancing that much when he first came, because that hadn't been one of his regular places, but there was a lot of people, but some of them were relatives. When you grow up in the same community, I've got so many relatives up there I have more relatives in that cemetery than I do. I mean, they all were, I mean, they came from huge families, and my grandmother was an Eigenberg, and there was a ton of Eigenbergs and Todds, and I was, I'm relation to everybody up there. If you really look around, and as we got older, and you know, we laughed about it because we said we're relation to everybody up here because, and we were through our grandmothers or, you know,
Interesting. Well,
somebody
let's go
else.
back to Tom because I'm getting very interested. So he talks you into letting him drive you. He had a car?
He had a car, a truck or something, I can't remember. I think he had a car at that time, or his dad's truck, I don't remember.
So
But,
you get in this car,
mm-hmm.
and then what?
He took me home, and I got out of the car and went in. You know, I mean, my parents were pretty strict about, you know, they didn't want me going with anybody they didn't know. Of course, up there you knew everybody almost. I mean, everybody knew everybody. And my dad was very active in the community, so, you know.
Well, so that doesn't sound very romantic though. So
No,
how
it
did this
wasn't.
turn into some kind of marriage?
Well, he would come and ask me to go to the dance again, you know, and then we started dating, and then he joined the Navy, he joined just before he got drafted because of his situation with his brother. And so he was gone, so I worked at the pine shops until he was gone. And then when he left, I moved to Grand Rapids, and I worked at Sackner's on a switchboard of 64 posts, you know, pulling cords.
Oh my goodness.
And Sackner's was a manufacturing plant for, I think they made fiber for furniture and that sort of thing. But it wasn't huge, but it was right down on Lower Monroe. And so I stayed with one of his sisters, because he had, one of his sisters was a teacher of mine, the oldest one. And then she taught all 8th grades and drove from White Cloud to our school, which was quite a ways.
Yeah.
And then this sister was his favorite sister, and she was my favorite sister-in-law. She was a top secretary for the guy that was president of American Seating. And so Tom had stayed with her, and of course when I moved down, she invited me to come and stay with her, but I had to walk across 6th Street Bridge, or I had to walk. She lived on Escott, and so I had quite a ways to walk to get to work, but it wasn't bad, you know. I mean, and he was gone. He was in Philadelphia the first 2 years of the service. He had to join for 4 years. And so
Were you engaged at that time? Is that why you went to?
I don't remember that we were engaged. I guess that was after. I don't remember when we got engaged.
Do you remember how he asked you?
Oh yeah, I think he expressed that. But then he was going to he was going on a cruise. They were sending him across the Atlantic on a boat, and that's when he called me and wanted to get married. And because he was afraid I might go out and have too much fun while he was gone, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, we got married and he left. And he was gone for 6 months.
When
And
did you get married?
on May 2nd, 1953. And he was gone for 6 months, I think it was, and then he came home. And I had moved in with Helene, his sister, and I was working at Sackner's. And I stayed there until he got transferred to Rhode Island. And that's when we lived right next door. This couple followed us. He was on the East Coast. I forget where he was stationed on the East Coast, but anyway, he got a transfer up to Rhode Island, so we were both in the same, we lived side by side, and so it worked out good because the girls could, we went back and forth and made sure we were doing okay, and we rented a summer cottage, which wasn't exactly ideal, but it fit the bill, at least we had a roof over our head.
Yeah, I understand it was kind of hard to find housing after the war.
It was, and this couple did not have any children, and they took us in, and we rented from them. And he was a builder. His name was Leon Inman, and they were very nice to us. I mean, they really didn't have any children, so we used to watch their dog for them because they had a relative on, let me see, was that Block Island? I think it was Block Island. That's just off the coast of Narragansett, a little ways. So they used to go over there for a few days, and so they'd ask us to watch Skippy, the dog, for them. And
was it like a resort island or something?
It was. We were right on Narragansett Bay. It was, beautiful beach, and I could see the big boats coming up the waterway. Mm-hmm. But they tell me it's all different now. They tore down all those and they built high rises all along there. So it's not the same, But Gaynor and I shopped together and we watched one another's kids if we needed to, Mm-hmm. And our oldest daughter was born out there. So I had her at the naval base. I never saw the doctor before, and it was rather weird, but
wow.
It was cheap because, of course, we didn't get hardly any pay. For $4,000 a year to live on wasn't much.
So let's talk about how you came to Plainfield Township. How did that work?
Well, when we moved to Grand Rapids, when we came back from the service, we became very close to his sister that I lived with and he lived with. And we lived in an apartment that she had and her husband for a while. And then I was on the hunt to find a place that I could buy that had a yard or some place that I wasn't in an upstairs apartment. And so I talked to a lot of realtors, and it was not easy back then. We only had $1,000 to put down, and the realtor told me, you can't buy a house with $1,000. So I spent a lot of time on the phone, and I found an old guy that was a realtor, and he's the one that told me, he said, you really haven't got enough down, Well, then we found a house in Plainfield Township out on Grand River Drive that was, it didn't have a basement, and it had 2 bedrooms and a bathroom and a garage, and that was it. But it had a really big lot, and so I thought, boy, this is, at least I got a place for the kids to play,
How many kids did you have at that point?
We just had Cheryl at first, and then later on we had Michael, another Michael named after his uncle that passed, you know. And so we just had the two. And so we lived there, and we bought it on a land contract because that was the only thing we could do. And as luck had it, I don't know how I knew the guy that held the contract, but he was glad to take us in and take a chance on us because he was trying to get rid of the two we had in there. They were separating, and there was quite a bit of damage that my husband had to repair. And I mean, it had no basement. It was a cement floor. And so, but anyway, we lived there for, oh boy, I think we lived there until we had our third child. Lori was born when we were in that house too. And by the time we had 3 children in there, it was a small house. And I never forget, my grandma came and she said, "You gotta learn to walk before you run." Or she thought we spent way too much money. We only spent $8,000, 8,000 and something for it. And, Tom did some work on it, but here and there, what we could do.
Was he working elsewhere now?
He went to work for Rose Manufacturing, which was a furniture company in Grand Rapids, which but it was on the south end of town, so he had to drive a ways. So he was working there, and
you were at home with the kids.
I was at home with the kids because back then there weren't any babysitting companies around. And of course, I got acquainted with the neighbors, and we used to change babysitting and take care of help one another out. And a couple of the neighbors didn't drive, and I did, so I would take them shopping. We'd go shopping together to get food and so forth.
So what was Plainfield Township like then?
It was, when we moved into the Northview district, there wasn't a Northview district. They told us we either had to go to Creston or Comstock if we reached the high school age, and so there was no Northview. So, but they were all good people. A lot of them were from the northern part of the state, some of them, a couple across the street was from Howard City and Morley. And that daughter, we just met them the other day. They became really good friends, and they've lost both their parents now, but their father was on the school board. His name was Richard Johnson. So we had him as a key person that helped to form, and there was a lot of people out there with families that were, Luann Briggs' mother and dad lived on Hordite, and the first time I met them, they were living in a garage and I think they had 4 children at least at that time. And Luann was in Cheryl's grade, and Bill was in, there was another girl, Sandy, Luann, Sandy, and Bill. Bill was in, I think, the same grade as Mike, but I'm not sure. Now, I have to think about that. Or maybe Sandy was in his grade. But anyway, we had groups that we formed a lot of friendships with the ladies, and we had a Kent community. They had an extension program for us, and it was a lot of, frankly, kind of information they gave out. It was sponsored by Michigan State college, I think.
Yes.
And they came up with recipes, how to can, how to sew, how to, I mean, things that probably we didn't, maybe they were helpful. I think they were, and that they got us together as groups. And I was busy trying to make sure that I wanted my daughter to be in campfire. I wanted her to be in 4-H. And so I spent a lot of time on the phone trying to organize and get things going like that, because I did have 4-H when I was growing up. That's about all we had out in the farmland, but I spent a lot of time, and I met a lady that I was on the phone trying to get campfire leaders, because it was really hard to get a lot of those moms. They didn't want to do anything to work to get things moving, and a lot of them didn't have cars or transportation, and so I'll never forget, I called this one lady, her name was Stephanie Witt, and she was a teacher. And I called her. She moved into the district down on Grand River Drive, down at close to 3 Mile. And I called her up, and she had daughters. So I thought, wow, 4-H or, campfire girls. So I asked her if she would be a campfire leader, and to my surprise, she said, yes, I would love to. And she was very organized and very good, and she took those kids up to, there was a place that had symphony music in Canada. I don't know how many times she took them up there. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's doing this, Her husband's name was Gil, and I don't remember what he did. I think he worked on mobile homes for a while, but they had a nice house, and Stephanie was, I loved her. She was so organized and so good with those kids. And she taught them a lot of stuff besides campfire, But campfire had their own program. I mean, they come out with some direction, and she passed away, I think, last year, and she went up into Iceland, and she traveled, and she was 83 or 84 years old. She came back from that trip, and I had sent her a message and told her how thankful I was for her expertise and how she did so much for the girls, I was really pleased with her. And she died shortly thereafter, and I just couldn't believe it. But she came back with some kind of a heart problem, and her daughter, she started a kitchen by Stephanie that's now kitchen by Kathy, I think, or Karen or somebody. It might still be one of her daughters, I don't know, because she just had girls, she didn't have any boys, but she was very good with the campfire girls.
So at what time did you get involved with the township?
In 1965, was it 65 or 62? I had 2 kids in school, and the youngest one was not, I think she was just starting kindergarten. But I had a really good neighbor across the street, and she had a little boy that was the same age. And she didn't drive, so every time she'd see me backing out, she'd come running. She was a great gal. I loved her. And she died very young of a heart attack. Left. I couldn't believe it. But I started working part-time. Just, I worked at Top Value at Christmas and spring. Top Value store stamps. And I did that because I could do it when the kids were in school, and I had some really good neighbors that we'd exchange watching each other's children when needed, you know. And so I did that, and I cashiered at the drive-in theater, which was not a glorious job, but at least I made enough money so we could have a little money to spend, you know, because Tom wasn't making, I mean, back then it was pretty skinny, but we managed, you know. And then we saw a house down the street for sale when we decided that house was too small for us. And I started the hunt, you know, for a bigger house. And we were going to move to Jenison, and our oldest daughter had a fit because she said, I have all my friends here and I don't want to move, you know. Well, then there was a house for sale right across from Johnson's house. And it was, I can't even think of the type of house, but it was well built. It was built by a guy that did it himself, you know. And it had a nice big living room and a dining room and a kitchen and a basement, and it had I don't remember if the garage was two-stall or not. I can't remember, but and had a breezeway. And so we bought that house for $13,000, and of course we had a mortgage, but that was okay. I mean, they only, back then there was Mutual Home that handled the mortgage for us, and they charged, I mean, I thought it was the great thing. I think our house payment was only $67 a month, which was cheap, you know, because we were paying for that 89 because it was a land contract. We were paying a lot of interest, you know, and so we moved down the street and it was great. So, and we loved that house. We ended up putting a pool in the backyard and a fence, and we had a garden, and there was a hill right there where the kids could sled down the hill, you know, all the other kids would come and go down the hill.
So once you got settled there, you decided to work for the township?
Well, I went to pay taxes at the township one day, and I said, you don't have any part-time work, do you? And they said, oh, as a matter of fact, we do. And so I think I started for $1.60 an hour or 65 or something. It wasn't much, but they were very, they didn't, you know, they were happy to have me come because I worked in all departments, because I knew the gig of the township because of my dad's experience as a supervisor, you know. And so I worked in the tax department first, for the guy that did the assessments on the properties, you know, and then I worked in the water department. I worked all over wherever they needed me, I went. And so I did that until 1972, 70 maybe. I ran for office because I had no benefits, none. You know, I mean, flat out, you got paid. And I think I don't remember if I got 2 weeks vacation. I'm not even sure. I didn't get any perks, that was for sure. But, you know, the guys at the water plant there was one gentleman that had 8 children, and they covered all of the health care for him, you know, but I had nothing. So anyway, I thought, I guess I'll run for office. Because I got acquainted with a lot of the realtors that came in, and I looked up property for them, and so I ran against John Rapplier. He was 73 and or 74, and he was, he would sit on the phone and spell out his last name for everybody, and I was like, good boy. But I worked in all departments, so I had a pretty good knowledge of everything that was going on. And I lost by 17 points.
What were you running for, trustee?
Clerk. I ran for clerk first. And a lot of people came in and said, we didn't realize what your name was, because I'd helped a lot of people. And they said, you should have told us what your name was. And well, that's the way it was, I was busy. And so the next year I ran and I won. And so I was clerk for 13 years. And Mr. Rapplier retired because it was, he was getting he spent more time on the phone spelling out his last name than he did. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, now, when you came in, so you had started working there in the early 60s before you ran for office?
I think it was 72 or 72 was when I won, because my daughter was graduating from.
But I mean, when you were doing part-time work there?
Oh, part-time. I stayed there until, I went right from part-time work into the clerk's job.
Yeah, but so it sounds like you were there, I was trying to get an idea of how long you worked there part-time before you ran.
Well, it must have been 10 years.
10 years.
Maybe 9 years. Wow. I don't know for sure. It was.
Well, you sure knew what was going on by that time.
I had a good picture of the whole job.
I know that at that time, one of the big issues for the township was the purchase of, or the transfer of, the Heiser house to township possession.
And I don't remember if that happened when I was supervisor or if it happened when I was clerk. I don't remember the date that house was transferred.
I think it was in 73.
I think, yeah, it could be, because I think when I finished as clerk, the supervisor decided he was retiring. So the board came to me and said, would you like to move into the supervisor's chair? And I said, well, that wasn't in my master plan. That never occurred to me, I said, I'm not sure. And they said, well, we just want to tell you, you know more about this township than anybody else. So we think maybe you will have to train that person, if you don't take it. And so I thought about that for a while, and I said, well, I guess I'll take the job, And so that was in 1983.
So you had to run for that office.
I did, but I moved into the supervisors, and Don Lamoureux moved into managing the water department. And so then I was in the position, and I ran, and I won, and then I was there for 13 years. So, but it always amazed me because they furnished the supervisor a car, because of course he had to go to the county to meetings and, wherever there was anything going on, you had to be part of it. And they looked at me and said, do you think you need a car? And I said, oh, heavens no, I can run down to the county. And when I was clerk, we used to have to deliver the ballots and our count at the county, no matter if it was 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock or when. We had to go down there to deliver the count and everything we turned in, you know. So it was a long day. You were up at 4 in the morning to get ready, and then the polls opened at 8 o'clock, and you had to have everything set up and ready to go. And it was a long day, you know. And so I don't know, when I went into the supervisor's job, I thought, but in Grand Rapids Township, Marcia Beaucamp she was following right behind me. She was a clerk, and then she moved in, her dad was a supervisor, and so she moved into the supervisor's job about the same time I did. So we used to go to a lot of meetings together to save on running, you know, but.
So it sounds like there might have been a little bit of differential treatment for you as a female supervisor?
Oh, there absolutely was. And I didn't get the salary that he got, even though I had a lot of experience. Of course, he used to own a store. When I first paid taxes in Plainfield Township, I paid him to a Lamro store in Comstock Park. And so he was in that position. He was treasurer before he was supervisor. Mm. He was a nice guy, and we got along okay. Sometimes he did things that I thought was a little quirky, but you know, and I disagreed with him a little on things, but in general, he would not build a new building. And we had government money that was sitting there. And in 1985, when I became supervisor, I thought, we're going to lose that federal money if we don't use it. And we were in this little bitty cement block building, and I had 17 employees in there, and it was horrible because they were complaining about the deodorant on the person next to them, you know, or the lack of deodorant. I mean, it was very tight because we had the assessing department and the water department, and it was very tight. And our meeting room was in the basement of that building. And so, when I took over as supervisor, I said, I'm going to spend that money and we're going to build a new township office. And we did, because Don did not, he was just afraid to go again. He was afraid the public was not going to accept it, you know. And I thought, what have I got to lose? I can't handle all these 17 people working in here on top of one another. I mean, it was very crowded. And so I just bit the bullet and said, if I lose the job, so I lose the job. They can get somebody else to do it. But we built the new building, and I have the pictures of the opening and, you know, all the things that we did. Of course, they've added onto it twice. And I think that was unnecessary because, you know, but we had a lot of growth on this side of the river, you know, and it became very, I mean, if there was an accident on West River or on Plainfield or the bridge, you had to direct traffic to go clear to North Park to get across the river. And so, you know, I mean, there was issues that we had to deal with that became and people would not accept condos back then. Mm-hmm. We had some tough times with condo associations that, you know, the builder would come in and want to build condos, and the people said, we don't like the people that live in condos. Well, then after the condos were built, they all moved into the condos. And there was, I mean, when we had this built, because every time we tried to buy a condo, there was 3 bids and you couldn't get one. you know, it was just impossible. So we just bought the lot and picked out what we wanted and built, you know, so. But now condos are so popular, you know, and, but my husband would let me move back into Plainfield because he said, I know you wouldn't be able to stay out of politics. And I said, well, perhaps that's true, I don't know, but you know, I've stayed out of it. I don't.
Well, I would like to ask you just one more thing about the Heiser Museum, because looking at some of the early paperwork, it looks like the intention was to, well, or the understanding was that at some point that building would be too small to house all of the artifacts. Over the years, it's been 50 years now.
Has it really?
Yeah. So there's some indication that maybe another museum would have to be built by the township. Was that your understanding, or was that ever that clear? And, because it's certainly changed now.
Well, I know Wendell Briggs was on the board for a long time, and Wendell used to have a campground there, and he gave that land. I mean, Luann has been very active in it, and that's good because she's got an interest there, you know, and she does a good job, I think. And but Wendell was kind of a, I don't know, he was a different guy, but he did a good job, and he taught gun safety to a lot of the young kids, and I had my son in Indian Guides, and you know, I mean, the guys were, I had to do all the organizing when it was the men that had to do it, you know. They would talk about fishing and going fishing and hunting, and that was a hard deal to handle, but Wendell was very good at helping with young people groups, you know. He was very giving of his time, and he was kind of he was a good guy. I mean, he worked hard, and they had, I don't know how many kids they ended up with, 5, I think, but.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your approach to child rearing. Just as you look back on it now, how would you summarize the way you approach child rearing?
Well, I guess it just came natural. I mean, I felt like I knew what I wanted my kids to be involved in, and I was very strict with them, you know, and I made them help when I was working. My daughter used to complain because she had to, you know, I'd lay out what I was going to fix for food for the whole week, and then on the weekend I cooked like crazy, and so we'd have leftovers one meal, and you know, several things that we could have, that I could have them put in. And Mary Smith, God bless her soul, she used to laugh at me because she said, you're the only person I know that can slap your kids over the phone. I thought, because, you know, sometimes I'd have to get after them, but anyway, it worked out. And the township, that was one thing that I give the township credit for. I didn't have any of the perks that the guys had, or I know they made more money than I did, but I told them when I started, I said, I've got 3 children, my husband works in the south end of town, and I'm responsible for getting them to the dentist, to the doctor, to whatever. They said, that's okay, you can do that. And I did. I mean, somebody had to do it. And so I would take them to the dentist, and you know, but they were very good about that. I have to give them credit for that. But
What do you think has been your biggest contribution to the community, or however you would frame that?
Well, I always felt like you had to let the people have their say. They should, you know, and Don Lamro was, I mean, he was, when he was supervisor, some nights we wouldn't get out of there till 12:30. And it was like, come on, we got to be back here at 8 o'clock in the morning. And so we had to put a 3-minute deal on it because he would let people talk and go on and on and on. And, you know, I mean, that's okay. I think you have to let people have their say, but you have to have some kind of order to survive. I mean, it was just impossible to go. I mean, if you're having a controversy over a complex of condos or whatever, it can go on and drag on much longer than what you had hoped it would, you know. And so I'm glad that they finally put in that 3-minute. We did get that passed, but I always felt like the people need to have a say in what's going on, you know. And so I always tried to let them have their 3 minutes to tell us or to present it to the board, you know. So,
well, it sounds to me like, as I've listened to your various thoughts on this, that maybe organizing the presentation and the operation of the township was a gift that you had and that you were able to bring to the supervisor's position.
Well, I guess it was because I grew up with it, you know, and so I enjoyed the job, and I belonged to the Clerks Association. We had a Michigan Clerks Association, and I was active in that, and when I got rid of the voting machines, Ken Anderson and I from Ada Township went to the board, I went to the board, he went to his board, and we went to the county clerk, who was old at the time, older and getting ready to retire. And he almost threw us out of his office because he didn't want anything to do with any computers, nothing. And there was nothing on computer when I went to the township. Not everything, I had to record everything by hand. There was nothing, there was no computers. And so the first thing I did when I was clerk is we had 13 of those heavy 900-pound voting machines. And, you know, they were stored at the school buildings and all over wherever we had the polling places. But the trouble is, in those schools, of course, when this voting machine wasn't used, it got pushed back in some closet or corner where you had to dig it out, and you had to haul all these heavy metal things that set up those machines, and it was not an easy job. I mean, it was heavy. I mean, and you couldn't get them moved from building to building because of the weight of them. So I just thought that, and I mean, we didn't have anything on computer for the recording. I had to record and give a report to the board like the old-fashioned bookkeeping way, you know, and I did that, but I took bookkeeping in high school, you know, but it was very evident that we had to grow out of that and into the computer age. But the first time we ran a payroll on the computer, we got it running, and we had to stay there until 3 o'clock in the morning because we didn't dare to stop it. So that was a long night, but you know, we got it, and thank God we got everything on computer, and now they have everything organized so much better, you know. But I mean, you have to move on when computers come along, and I feel sorry for my daughters. She had to put a new computer system in the bank she works for, and she said, "Oh, it's a nightmare," you know. And it is. It is a very exploring nightmare, but you have to do it. I mean, otherwise you're going to be behind the times, you know.
Mhm.
So we did it, and I had some good people working for me, and I'm still friends with some of them yet today, you know. And and we had a good fire department. In fact, I ran into a couple of the guys at the doctor's office the other day, and you know, I mean, it was a good learning curve and a good experience for me too. I mean, I grew and Michigan State did, I mean, they started the Township Association that was active out of Lansing, and they had a lot of classes for us and training, and I had, I, I've got so many things that honor you for doing this or that. And, now I look at them and I think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with all these things? I want to, you know, but you hate to throw them out. I've taken some of them down to Luann if she thought they were anything that they wanted, you know, and so.
That's a good question. Well, now, as you look back on your life, when you think about when you were younger, coming out of high school, did you ever imagine that your life would turn out this way? What was your dream for your future? Did you have one?
I didn't have one because I was, I was kept busy on the farm. I mean, I drove horses on the hay loader. I drove horses. We had horses, and our only out with the horses is we got to ride on these trails that were 2 tracks that didn't have any traffic, you know, and so once in a while in the good fall day or something, a bunch of us would go for a ride on horses, you know, because a lot of us had horses, but.
So it sounds like you took it a day at a time. And when you think about it, are you content with that you've ended up here?
Yes, I enjoyed the work, and I enjoyed the people. I mean, I had good, I mean, you had to sometimes work out, you know, somebody that was really upset about something, and I had some people that, you know, some people are never satisfied no matter what you do, but you try to do the best you can to solve the problem. But we had and we had an old gentleman by the name of Gil. What was his last name? Herringa. And he had a big old house right where Russ's is today on Plainfield. And he was the secretary of the planning commission for years, and up into his 90s he did it. But it was he just loved doing it, you know, and he was really good at it. But he was a nice old man. He lost his wife, and he hired one of my mother's cousins to work for him to come and do housework because but then they tore that house down, and I always kicked myself that I didn't get a picture of it, you know, because it was a big old house it was sort of, and there was a big house also on the hillside by the bridge,
The old,
It was
Brewer,
Brewer.
Joseph Brewer's house.
Yeah. He moved out there. He had a lot of money, I guess, and they used to tell me how I mean, some of these people would tell me how they had this big old building that they had church in even, and the horses were in the basement. Sometimes the horses would get to fighting and kicking, and they'd have to quit church to go upstairs or to go downstairs and get the horses settled down before they could continue on. But that old gentleman, and I think it was, I can't remember his name. He lived on Rogue River Road, and he used to tell me how much that trading post was. And when you stop and think about it, there weren't a lot of trucks on the road back then, and they actually transported everything on the river. I mean, people came from Lowell and Ada with logs and furs and whatever they had to trade, and that was, he said, that was a bigger trading post than anything in Grand Rapids, because there wasn't the trucks, when you stop and think about it, but anyway, it was interesting to me, because I can't imagine, but that area was pretty developed back then, but.
And Plainfield Avenue itself and West River Drive have really changed over the years.
Yes. And when we put the Belmont Bridge in, oh my, I had some really tough public hearings, and the county had that on their master plan. And they came to us, and Dave Gromler was on, and Dottie Siebers was on the board. Dottie Siebers was a big, she was very for parks. She was always after parks, and that was her thing, And she was a good board member. She was always there and did her bit, but Dave worked for the county as an engineer, and he was. And Hap Woodworth was I don't think he was ever on the board, except maybe the board of review, but he lived over on Woodworth, a really nice guy, got killed helping a neighbor with a tractor. It was a sad day, when he got killed, but he had a big farm, and there was a school over there called West Oakview, I think it was, and I think they've since got rid of that, but my granddaughter teaches at North Oakview, but she lives on she lives on now I can't think of the name of the street she lives on, but she's right by Jupiter and in that Platte.
Well, I think we're probably at the end here. As you think about the country of America, in which you grew up in and which has changed so much, what are your thoughts on that, and what advice would you have for the future?
Well, I'm really concerned with what's happening. I think we sadly need age limit on the people that are serving in Washington. It really bothers me that, it's like an old people's home, and they really, really need to have a age limit. Those people, that lady that just passed away, if her daughter hadn't told her what to do, she wouldn't even understand what she was voting for. And she probably was very good in her day, but her day, it's not an old people's home. And I think there ought to be an age limit of 75 or less. Um, and they ought to be able to follow it. And in my day, I mean, I can't believe the people they didn't go in it to get rich. They never came out rich. I worked with Vern Ehlers, I worked with Jerry Ford, I worked with, what was the other guy's name that died? They got a street named after him.
Yeah, Paul something.
Paul, yeah, he was a really nice guy. And it was a shame that he died. He had a brain tumor or something. But he was, I mean, they were all hardworking, honest people. I can't believe that. And I just can't imagine that they can put people in there that come out filthy rich. I mean, there's something wrong with this picture. It isn't about the money, it's about the service to the people, I'm very upset about the situation up in Big Rapids, because they're putting in a huge 900 acres they've bought up, and they're putting in a battery plant. And the biggest owner is Chinese. And it's very concerning to me, and I've had probably a little bit too much to do with it, but I just don't, the people never even got to say we want it or we don't. They had no say in it, and I don't think that's right, I can understand why they're all upset. They're recalling the whole board up in Green Township in Big Rapids. Interesting is right. And I even had a letter. I have 53 acres up there yet that I own that was part of my parents' farm. And I got a letter from San Diego. They wanted to buy my 53, well, they didn't even have the right description, number one, because there's two descriptions to it. And they wanted to buy it. And I said, is this company associated with China? Because I think what China is doing is hiring some realtors in San Diego. I said, would you please take my name off the list, because I am not selling my property to China. And I said, I think that is just giving China a foot on our ground, and I don't, and it concerns me because there's rivers up there and water, and I think they're after the water and the water around the Michigan, and I don't think that's right at all. I'm really concerned about it, and they're buying it, they're trying to buy up more property all the time, and they're doing it. And I applaud that gal from South Dakota that she stopped it in South Dakota, and I think North Dakota stopped it too. And I don't know why our people in Congress, or I don't know why they're just ignoring it. Like, it's not, you would think they would take an interest in that and be on top of it, I would think, but I don't know. It's scary.
Yeah.
And I don't, not that I hate China, but I think they're up to no good in buying.
So do you still have faith in America and the American dream?
Well, I'm losing a lot of faith in it, I'll tell you that. But I just, I think it's disheartening to see what's happening, because those people, I mean, Mitch McConnell, Pelosi, they're all, maybe they were good people in their day, but they didn't go in there just to get rich. At least they never did when I was in politics, you know. And I never, because Vern Ehlers was a very common, ordinary professor that worked at Aquinas, and he rode the same plane or the same bus that the rest of us did, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of people we need in Washington, not people that want to come out filthy rich. And where do they think they're going to live if they bring, I mean, I'm not against helping people that come over here, but let them do it the right way, the way they always came. They came and they worked and they went through the proper procedure. What happened to that, you know? Instead of just bringing them all and throwing them in these cities at our sanctuary cities, that upsets me because I don't know where they're going to house all those people and where are they going to have jobs. And the drugs that are coming, that upsets me too, because I don't believe in drugs. I never wanted my kids anywhere near them, and I think that fentanyl is deadly.
Yeah, for sure.
And it scares me.
Yeah. Well, you know, America has been through a lot in its history, and maybe this is another turning point. You sort of have to have faith in people, I guess, that bottom
Yes, and I really think that there should be enough people that would think that we've got to have rules and regulations and the rule of law. I mean, the way these people go into these businesses and steal stuff and smash windows, I don't agree with that.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody would.
I know. I think that's terrible. How can they ever survive in a business if you have that kind of control? You know, I mean, and they don't do anything with them. That's what bothers me. I mean, and there's so many shootings now. Oh my gosh, it's just frightening.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think you feel safe anywhere. But I hope that our country can survive it, you know. And I'm not against the battery operated electric cars, but for Biden to demand that everybody drive them, I think that's presumptuous to think that everybody can afford them.
Can I ask where you get your news?
I don't take the paper anymore because I disagreed with the press, so I quit taking that quite a while ago, and I wrote them a letter and told them the reason I left the press. But I usually I read some of it online, and my husband likes to listen to Fox News. We do listen to Fox occasionally, or more than occasionally. Sometimes I have to get rid of it and listen to the local station because I like to hear the local news too. But I don't know. I have a son-in-law that came over here from the Netherlands, and he has had a sad life with a stepmother that wasn't very nice to them, and they came and they were very poor, and then their father died when he was only 64 or 65, and he never knew his mother from the time he was 3 until he got, after he married my daughter, you know. And he has worked very hard. He had a business, and he had a gentleman that was married to some of the people that started Russ's, and he took him in, and he was very successful in this business, and they have a building that they own over on 3 Mile across from Channel 13, Alpine, and he's done pretty good. And but my kids don't always agree with they're Democrats, and I have a hard time with that. So I told them, you will not tell me how to vote ever, but I still have my own mind, so I'm going to vote the way I want to vote, but I disagree with, I think Biden is, I don't know, he's way over his head in what he's doing, and I don't think he's the one that's driving the stream. I think he's being driven by Obama and because he's got his whole group in the White House,
Well, it's clear you have very definite opinions, so I think that's probably a good place to end, is that you are still very involved as an American citizen.
I certainly am. I wouldn't miss a vote for anything.
Yes.
I have grew up with it, and my kids sometimes get upset with me, but I told them, I'm sorry. I have to vote the way I believe.
Yes, you're entitled to your opinion.
Right, and I'm not sure of the new ones that are coming up. I like Nikki Haley. I think she's a sharp lady, but the jury's out on who I'm gonna vote for, but I'd like to see somebody that's strong and follows the rule of law.
Amen.
I believe in laws, and I believe in policemen. I think they have a really hard job. It's tough to, we had a treasurer that had a son that was killed over in Walker, and he was a really nice kid. He was a policeman for Walker. They named a street after him because he was putting down one of those strips, and this guy came up behind him and pinned him against the car and killed him.
Oh my gosh.
And his wife died of cancer, and he died, and his daughters were raised by the grandparents.
My goodness.
It was so sad,
Yeah.
So I have policemen don't know what they're facing every day when they go out there.
That's true.
And we have to have that kind of rule of law, I think, because it's necessary for the safety of the citizens. It's just you can't just let people run ragged and do whatever they want, whoever they want to shoot, or it's so scary.
Well, it could be chaos if people didn't take responsibility.
Right.
And so I just want to say, it's very clear to me that you are someone who did actually put your shoulder to the wheel and do the best you could to make sure that...
I tried.
Yeah, and you
and
succeeded.
I enjoyed it. I can't say I didn't, but I didn't, people were kinder back then. They weren't, I think that now there's an attitude out there that's not kind. That isn't all people. There's still a lot of good people in the world that try to help other people, but it's sad to see that happen, because I have grandchildren, and I'd like to see them be able to survive in a world and I disagree wholeheartedly with the way the schools are leaning towards changing the sex when they're so little. I disagree with that. I think that's just making mental harm to the little kids. They're too young. to make that decision when they're in the lower grades. You know, not all districts and not all states are doing it, but I think there's a lot of parents that are getting upset, and rightfully so. I would be at that school district yelling my head off if it was my children,
Sure.
you know. And I would feel very strongly about it, because I think when you do that when they're so young, you're just gonna make mental cases out of them. I mean, that's a sad way to go, I think. I mean, I don't know, there's some things that go on that just make you crazy, you know, but I like to see law and order, and I like to see people have the right, parents should have the right to determine what goes on and what their children are being taught. I mean, my mother was on the school board and hired the teachers, and, you know, I had a far cry from telling her I didn't like the teacher. That would have been disastrous. But, you know, I mean, it's okay. I mean, and we didn't even have a phone at our school.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Beverly, I want to thank you again for spending so much time and the trip down memory lane.
yeah, it was a trip down memory lane.
I enjoyed it very much, and it's a real honor to meet you and share this time with you. I thank you very much.
Well, thank you for interviewing me. I don't wanna tussle with the township. I think the township has to, they have to try and do the best job they can. And when we came up with the Northview school system, I always felt like we had the best parent support group. We had a good PTA, we had good people, and Luann was a product of that.
Sure.
And my children were too, and now that's up for grabs too, I guess, because the senior center has been very successful over there. And they've had a lot of good things that come out of it.
Absolutely.
And they have exercise classes, and they have a lot of good things that come out of that. But anyway, it's, my husband wouldn't let me move back into Plainfield, so that's probably a good thing. But I'm too old to do that anymore, but I will never lose my interest in what's happening, because I was brought up with it, and that's how I grew up, and it's part of my being.
You're a natural.